Purim Sameach, happy Purim. We're on the eve before Purim, and the story of the Megillah is a story that perhaps wouldn't have been remembered. In fact, if you look at the annals of world history, it barely appears. And in fact, the Talmud in Tractate Megillah has a dialogue that takes place between Queen Esther. Rabbi, again, we always have a question how to interpret the Talmud. Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, suggests that Queen Esther says to the sages, Kavuni lidorot, establish this holiday for generations. And the sages say, I don't think it has good optics. I don't think it's a great idea if we establish this holiday for generations because, it doesn't look good. You had double loyalties. You exposed yourself in the palace and suddenly we're Jewish and we're a fifth column and turned it all around. And she sends back, Shalcha lahem Esther, kvar katvuni b'sefer Dvri, Hayimim, למלכי פרס ומדי. There's no keeping it quiet. It's already out in the open. It's already happening. And the sages, in fact, established the holiday of Purim. And then she says, not only establish the holiday of Purim, but also katvuni, not just kavuni, establish me for generation, but write my story. Let my story be part of the generations. In fact, the scroll of Esther is included in the Tanakh. It is, depending on how you count, the only book of the Tanakh that takes place exclusively outside of the land of Israel. Obviously the Chumash, the book of Shmot, and Vayikra and Bamidbar and Dvarim are the tales of the Jewish people moving back from the Egyptian bondage to Israel. While they're not in Israel, they're gearing towards it. And the book of Yecheskel is also in the diaspora, but yearning back. The book of Esther is the only book that takes place in the diaspora in its entirety. And she says, I want this to be katvuni lidorot. I want my message to be an everlasting message. And Reb Tzadok suggests that what's lacking in the book of Esther? In the book of Esther, in a simple reading, it's a miraculous, amazing story. We all know that God's name is not mentioned in the scroll. In fact, it is the only one of two books of the Hebrew Bible that does not have God's name. The other being Megillat Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, but that rabbinically is a love song of the soul learning for God, the Jewish people yearning for God, and it is all filled with God awareness when it's read in that rabbinic light, and that's Rabbi Akiva's contribution as to why the Song of Songs is really not just a holy book, but the holiest of holy books. So what about the Megillah? Reb Tzadok suggests that the Megillah expresses the ability for human beings, to affect the course and the destiny of not only their lives, but the entire world. The pivotal phrase when Mordechai turns to Esther and says, Im charesh tacharishi ba'etahi revach v'atzala yiyu liyudim ha'makom acher. Esther, if you don't take the risks and go in and shake heaven and earth to save the Jewish people will be saved, but you won't be part of that story. You can opt in to be part of this amazing story. I feel we're blessed to live truly in amazing days, in days that we're witnessing day in and day out here in Israel, new immigrants coming from the Ukraine. We're witnessing upheavals of world orders, and our prayer that each one of us has the courage to write our own part of this story. Reb Tzadok argues that each one of us has our own unique letter, our own unique message, and no one else can say our story but us. But we need to be willing to be part of Katvuni Lidorot, write me for generations. Let the way I behave today to my spouse, to my child, to my community, to my family, to the world be one that I'll be proud of, not just in this moment, but I'll be proud of for generations. And that's really the message of leading a meaningful life, sometimes even when God's hand and God's name is hidden. Purim Sameach, Shabbat Shalom. May we be blessed to write ourselves into the story of the Jewish people.